Howdy, Elvenar players. As promised slash threatened, this is going to be a review of the Ancient Wonders up through chapter 16, which is currently where I'm at, and which ones I think are the most useful. This is going to be purely my opinion. Ancient Wonder effects get tweaked from time to time, so this is as of January 2026. Hopefully, you can pick up some tips and tricks for how to use some of these wonders, even if you've already decided which ones you want. I'm not going to be doing anything like a tier list because most of the ancient wonders are situational. They're good for different people looking for different things. So whether it's useful will depend on you and what you are looking to get out of the building. We're going to look at these in the order that you can unlock them. And immediately I'm going to break from the tier list idea by saying that the Golden Abyss is absolutely useful for everybody and is something you probably want to build. I'm going to be looking at Ancient Wonders at level 16 for comparison. That is a breakpoint. The levels after that usually start to really fall off in effectiveness, and 16 I feel is usually attainable over a reasonable amount of time with some amount of investment. So it's a decent place for looking at them instead of level 1 where you're not really appreciating what you can do with the Ancient Wonder. So the Golden Abyss does two things. One is before I forget, all of the Ancient Wonders provide ranking points based on how many knowledge points have been invested into them overall. So you'll see the ranking points don't go up at this break where there's a rune circle from 15 to 16, so you don't have to put in any knowledge points. But it goes up at all the other levels, and that can give you an idea of how many knowledge points each level takes and how many it takes to get up to a certain spot overall. And 4,000 may seem like a ton, but as you start collecting the ancient knowledge things from various spots in the game, it builds up over time. It does take some time, though. So, besides the standard points, the Golden Abyss does two things. One, it makes gold every 3 hours. The gold is based on your coin capacity. That is based on your main hall level. What is the maximum amount of coins you can hold? And it's a pretty decent amount. So you see that makes 2.25 every 3 hours at that level, and my residences are making only 38,000 an hour. Also, this Ancient Wonder is only 3x3, so it's really easy to fit in, and you can see that in this list. If you just hit the eye and flip over, it'll show you the build requirements, including the size. The other thing that it does is it gives you extra population. My standard residences are giving me about 7,000 to 8,000 right now. This at level 16 would give me 53,000 in a smaller space. How does it calculate how much population it gives you? Well, there's Ancient Wonder Power, which is what level it is, and there is your working population. That is how much of your population is required to run your buildings. It's calculated after you finish building or upgrading a building. So if you built a building that required 100 population, you would have to have 100 population free to build the building. But after you had built it, this number would go up, so you would see that immediately when it finished construction, you would get back an extra 13 or 14, I don't know how it rounds, population because the contribution from your Golden Abyss would go up. So the more stuff you've put to work in your city, it doesn't matter where the population came from, it matters whether they are working, whether they're required by one of the buildings. Then the more powerful this gets. Population's always something you need to build more, so absolutely recommend this. It's incredibly powerful, especially for its size. And the gold is great when you need it, and when you don't, you dump it into the wholesaler on the trader and get some extra goods. On the opposite end, we have the poor Tome of Secrets. Oh, Tome of Secrets, how I wish you were better. The Tome of Secrets has two effects. One is, it gives you supplies for every story quest you complete. That's not event quests, that's these story quests as you work through the chapter. Here, which early on you may be running through very quickly, but as you get later, you really slow down going through things, and this is still there, and it rarely gives you any supplies, and you don't want to be waiting on your story quest to get supplies you need, nor do you want to be waiting to collect your story quest in order to get the supplies. So that's not nothing, but as we'll see later, you've got more consistent options. It also gives you knowledge points, which sounds like, ooh, cool, that's amazing, right? And, you know, on an event building or something, it is, but you had to invest thousands to get here. It will be literal years before this ancient wonder gives you back more knowledge points than you put into it. It's a 4x4. Shoot, if we take one of these recent event buildings, this gives me 5 knowledge points in the same space. And I can switch it to other stuff if I want. And it gives me population, and it gives me culture. And I don't have to invest anything else in it for it to do those things for me. So, I will say, the Tome of Secrets looks awesome. I mean, especially with it animated. I've built it here just recently for this reason. I got far enough in the game that I had extra space, but I've been rearranging my city, so I don't know how quickly I can find it. I've probably gone past it, and everybody's pointing and yelling like, there it is, there it is, there it is. But it looks really cool. It gives you a cool avatar that is like your face coming out of a book. So I'm not saying don't build it, obviously, but you're building it for looks more than for its mechanical effect. Now, that being said, looks, cosmetics, and Elvenar are important. That's quite a useful thing to have. Golly, I bet you everybody's pointing at it. Oh, tournament started. Cool. All right, next up, Endless Excavation. This is another one. This one helps you get supplies. Now, the first thing it does, by the way, is reward per mystical object. So what that means is every time you come over into your Magic Academy and you finish out one of these crafting vision vapor sections, you'll get a mystical object, and every time you do that, the Endless Excavation will give you a few relics for one of your boosted standard goods. Way back in the mists of time, before we had tournaments, this was invaluable, because getting to 700% boost on your goods was really, really difficult. But now, you get that reasonably quickly, comparatively, and after that, relics of your boosted good don't do you much good. You can't use them here in this section. All of these will specifically require not your boosted goods. You see planks as mine, and scrolls, and magic dust, and none of these will take those relics specifically. Occasionally, there'll be a crafting recipe for them, which is garbage once you've gotten to 700%. And maybe a pet food or something over here that uses them. But if you're active in tournaments, you should get those faster than you can use them. So that benefit might as well not exist except for the very early game players. So what this does that's actually useful is it gives you 900,000 supplies a day for me. That's 18% of your supply capacity, which is based on your main hall level. Now, filling essentially a fifth of all the supplies you can hold is not bad at all. For reference, I've only got magic workshops, but they're making like 119 an hour with a really heavily maxed out culture level. So that's a we'll get into how to do this later. So that is a pretty powerful amount. However, you usually find that you only need one ancient wonder that really addresses your supply needs. I find for a more active playstyle, the prosperity towers that are a few chapters away are better. But if you are a more casual player and you are just logging on like once a day, then an ancient wonder that gives you a big whack of supplies every day is not bad. But yeah, I'd pick it or the prosperity towers, depending on your playstyle. Needles of the Tempest is a pretty straightforward one. If you fight a lot, you definitely build it 100%. And if you never fight, don't build it. It speeds up your barracks training, which means that each squad trains faster, which is really good to have more troops. And it makes all of your light ranged units, that's from all three of your military training buildings. So that's your archers and your dryads and your rangers. I forget the name of the human one. Will do more damage all the time. And at level 16, they're doing over a third more damage, which is really good. And your barracks is going almost twice as fast. And since barracks units are pretty generic and good for everything, if you only want to build 2 military ancient wonders, this would be the second one I'd build. The first one I would build would be this one, the Martial Monastery. This is a beauty. This is a race-dependent one. If you are a human, this will be the Great Sanctuary. It will be cosmetically different, but it's exactly the same stats. Runes for one will work on the other if you're helping out your fellowship mates, so it's only a cosmetic and naming difference. This does two things, like most of these ancient wonders. One is it boosts the health of all of your troops. So that's a little over a quarter more health for all 15 possible troops you could have, which is really good and universal and helps make sure your troops don't die. So you can use them over and over, which is the real benefit of fighting in Elvenar, is the ability to hurl troops at something, win overwhelmingly, don't die, and then be able to have the same troops to go again without having lost anything. As if that weren't good enough, it gives you a bunch of culture based on your squad size. Every city's gonna be different, but as a reference for me right now, a level 16 would be giving me 77k in this chapter, and my total required culture from my city is 442. So this ancient wonder is getting about 8 math. Better than a fifth, I think. Somebody could double check math of the culture I need for my city. It is 5x5, so it is a bit bigger. The needles are like 5x3. 3x5, excuse me. So it's definitely one of the bigger ancient wonders, but it's well worthwhile. Even if you only fight a little, it'll justify itself based on the culture. So it's a big boon to your fighting. The other racial ancient wonder is the Crystal Lighthouse. This will be the Great Bell Spire if you are a human. Again, exactly the same shape, the same stats. The runes work back and forth even though they have different names. The building just looks different, and your cliff art is different if you're on desktop. So what does this do? This one is all about neighborly help. Every time you get one of those help chests, which can happen up to 3 times a day unless you have a much more advanced, much later chapter Ancient Wonder, you'll get some amount of one of your boosted standard goods based on your squad size. So that is, come back out here, easier to do here. So that will be whatever these 3 goods are for you, that will be one of them. It will not be any of the sentient goods or anything else. So you'll randomly get an amount of one of those 3. And that said, like 9,000-ish, and my standard shops on a 3-hour production are putting out like 6,000. They're doing like 2,000 an hour. So that's reasonably substantial. That is not an insignificant amount on the day if you are active with your neighborly help. But the real beauty is that it makes your neighborly help last longer. At level 16, when a neighbor comes and gives some amount of help to your culture buildings, this doesn't matter for your builder and it doesn't matter for your main hall, those just pile up. But for your culture buildings, instead of increasing the culture of a building by 8 hours, this will increase it for nearly a day. That lets whatever neighborly help you're getting spread across more different buildings and therefore help you out a lot better. This is good-ish, in my opinion, when you can unlock it. If you do a lot of neighborly help, maybe you're interested, especially if you're looking for ways to help out your culture. This will really shine in a trio with Watchtower Ruins and the Lighthouse of Good Neighborhood, which I'll go over when I get to the Lighthouse of Good Neighborhood, because it's by far the last. And that's when I came back and built this. Speaking of Watchtower Ruins, and those were a 6x4. One of the biggers. One of the reasons you might hold off is that's a fair bit of space. That's almost an entire expansion by itself. Watchtower Ruins are 4x5, a little smaller. These are about having more culture. That's straight up what they do. They give just as much culture as the Martial Monastery for a bit less space. But instead of increasing troop health, what these do is increase how much a neighborly help boosts the culture of a culture building. Normally, if a neighbor comes and shines one of your culture buildings, it will double the culture. By about level 16, you'll be getting 3/4 more-ish. You can see down here, I'm getting like 6/10, which is why if I come to any of my buildings that has received neighborly help, you'll see that the culture is not just double like you would normally expect, it is significantly more than that. So that building by itself just helps you have more culture, especially if you're getting neighborly help. If you're looking for a way to fix your culture, it can be good. If you're looking for a way to if you're getting enough of your culture from various event buildings and you don't really feel like you need neighborly help, then skip on this one for a while. You can always come back and add it and spend your knowledge points elsewhere. Thrones of the High Men is just for score, really. I would not recommend that anybody build this early in the game. What this does is it gives you a much smaller amount of culture, but what this is Ancient Wonder works on is your main hall, but also how many total Ancient Wonder levels you have in your city. So early on in your game, this does piddling amounts. Even for me, granted I don't have the most, but I've got over 300 Ancient Wonder levels, and you'll notice it's like less than a third of what the Martial Monastery or the Watchtower ruins are doing at the same level. What you get this Ancient Wonder for is ranking points. Ranking points help place you on the Elvenar leaderboards and on your fellowship list. They are, in that sense, purely cosmetic. They're just for fun. That being said, some people find chasing ranking points really fun. And I'm not going to knock that. It's a way to have fun in the game. However, this will give you piddling amounts until you have enough Ancient Wonder levels. And you can come back and build it at any point. If you come back and build it in Chapter 20 and level it up to level 16, it will give you the same amount of ranking points then as you would have if you had owned it ever since Chapter 5 or whenever it gets introduced. The difference being you'd have gotten to Chapter 20 faster because you could have used your space and your knowledge points for something that's more beneficial than this vanity piece. So it is a vanity piece, but it's fun. I plan to build it myself once I'm in a later chapter. But yes, this is purely for if you are finding ranking points fun and you've built up your city enough that this can give you a nice boost that you will enjoy. I would recommend wait on it till you get more free space and such in your city. Haha, as if we ever have enough space. All right, on to the dwarves. The Dwarven Bulwark is a 7x4, so one of the bigger ones. It does two things for you. One is it makes whatever your light melee barracks unit is. So that's sword acrobats for the elves, and I believe that's the axe barbarians for humans. It's based on your current squad size, so you'll get a bit more than a squad every 3 hours. That's not nothing. It's a nice little add-on. Now, you might think, oh, these ancient wonders that make troops, they're amazing for people who fight. I would disagree with that. I would say they're amazing for people who don't fight a lot. People who fight a lot are going to be investing more into the ancient wonders that speed up their training speed and the size of units they get from their barracks and training grounds and mercenary camps. So those sources of troops are more impactful, and that means that this is a smaller portion of your troop contribution. So I would say that giving you troops is a nice bonus if you're fighting a lot, but if you are looking to really up your troop count, I would focus more on things that up your troop production and or your training speed, and especially because those will multiply on each other. You find you make groups faster, and those groups are bigger, and if you make them more effective, that all multiplies with each other better than just adding some troops. So I'm not going to repeat that whole spiel for every ancient wonder that makes troops. Just know that I don't consider the troops the main draw of any of them. It's just a nice bonus. I would say the main draw is this. We're going to see two different ancient wonders that can increase your training capacity. That increases how much you can train in one group in your barracks, training camp, and training grounds and mercenary camp, the same way that an armory might. So if you are looking to skip out on doing as many armories, but you don't log on very often, so you need your barracks to not be sitting idle when you can't log on very often, this is a great way to fix your training capacity. That one's based on squad size, right? Yes. We'll get to the other one that can fix your training capacity in just a chapter or two. A couple. The other dwarven one is the mountain halls. This I'm going to compare to the Golden Abyss. One thing to notice, it's much bigger. Instead of 3x3, we have 3x8. But it will give you exactly the same amount of population as the Golden Abyss, and it's working on the same calculation. I think the calculation used to be different, but again, they've changed some Ancient Wonder stuff from time to time. So there's a call to have both if you want that population bump from both of them. I would not recommend getting this before a Golden Abyss. This standard goods production applies to whatever you are producing of these standard goods up here. And you might think, hey, that's great. That's nearly triple. But no. You'll see that mine is 24% because I just built this. That is not 24% more goods than I would have made otherwise. Instead, that is tacked onto the 700% you get from relics. I have a little expiring building boosting that right now. So you'll see that my boost for scrolls and for scrolls, again, little expiring building could boost that, is 724% instead of 700%. That means if I had the mountain halls at level 16, it would be 880%. So it's not nearly as big of a boost as it looks like. It's something, but don't think you're going to be tripling your goods output when getting this. And that also is just goods you produce from your manufactories. It doesn't help with things from the help chests, from the Crystal Lighthouse, or event buildings that may be making stuff. So that's not nothing. But now that it's a lot easier to get to the 700% boost than it used to be, it's not as crazy impactful as you might think, especially once you start getting into needing sentient goods or later ascended goods more than standard goods. I'd mainly get this for the population because it's still, if you have the resources to level it, quite good population, just not as good as the Golden Abyss. All right, Prosperity Towers. I said, I'm going to have to break this into two parts, aren't I? Well, let's finish the fairies, and then we'll break here. Prosperity Towers. This is the other way besides the endless excavation to fix your supply issues. And in my opinion, especially if you play often-ish, it's worth waiting for. Instead of making supplies once per day, this makes them every 3 hours. So you can compare between the two. This is 225. You need 1, 2, 3. You need 4 collections. Is that right? If you're going to collect that 4 times in a day, it's as much as the endless excavation. If less, less. If more, more. So that's nice. But where this really shines is that whereas I consider the endless excavation's other benefit to be useless, mostly, once you get past a certain point in the game, this benefit is amazing. Your power of provision spells normally last 10 hours, and by level 16, you've nearly doubled that. Furthermore, they normally double the output. Now, you are near tripling your output, so you are nearly doubling the effect a Power of Provision spell has. I know the percents are sometimes confusing, but this is increasing the supplies to 200%, not by. So, if I come down over here, what you can do is you'll see that this is making 940,000 at $4.93 an hour, whereas this without a Power of Provision is 227 versus 119. So I have mine's a bit higher than 16, so I've around tripled ish. Can't do that math in my head. my output by slapping a power of provision on. So when you'll get power of provision spells from tournament rewards. So you play the tournament, and this lets you not only get supplies reliably and dependably from your prosperity towers, but it lets you flex to get more supplies when you need them. If you need more supplies right now, slap power of provision spells on more of your workshops. They'll last most of a day. And if you don't need supplies right now, store the power of provision spells for when you do. So it takes a little longer to get to, but in my mind, this is a much better way of supply fixing than the endless excavation. Blooming Trader Guild. The Beautiful Bee. Okay, this reduces your trader fee, which that's the fee you pay in the trader for trading with somebody who you haven't scouted yet. As your scouting range gets bigger, this gets less impactful, but if you care, this can drop it by more than half. That's nice. Wholesaler offers. This is actually quite nice if you've got your culture well fixed and you're making a lot of extra coins and supplies that you put into the wholesaler. This can really help with your standard goods, because your wholesaler offers go from, that's a place to dump some extra maybe, to, hey, that's a pretty good amount. You'll see the effect even at level 14, whereas my manufactories are making about 6,000 in 3 hours, and that's my boosted one. If each time I trade with the trader, I'm getting 43,000 of that good. It's less amazing for the higher levels, but it's still quite good. I don't recommend going to getting all of your goods that way, because various quests and fellowship adventures will call for you to do certain productions or to produce an amount of your basic goods, which needs you to actually produce it from a manufactory, not buy it from the wholesaler. But that's a big bonus. But the main draw of the Blooming Trader Guild is this settlement production bonus right here. When you have, let's go up to our even comparison. What you do is when you have a guest race, is what it means by settlement. This makes all of the guest race buildings make more than a third more stuff. If they have inputs, if you have to pay them something for them to make whatever, the inputs don't change. You don't have to give them more mana or seeds or supplies or steel or whatever, but they produce more. This may not seem that impactful in the early guest race chapters if you have power provision spells, because those produce your capped guest race goods, and that's what the research tree mostly calls for, so you can just use those to blast through the chapter and not care about this. However, later chapters will have bigger production chains, and the research will require intermediate goods that are not capped, so power of provision spells won't give them to you. I think they did that specifically in order to make it so you couldn't zoom straight through chapters on nothing but the power of provision spells anymore. When you get to that point, this is amazing if you want to increase your speed through a chapter by getting more settlement goods. If you don't care how long a chapter takes you, then that doesn't really do anything for you. So that brings us up to the end of the Fairy Chapter. Part 2, we'll start with the orcs. And by the way, there'll be the other way to fix your training capacity. That's the words. Hope this has been somewhat helpful. See you in part 2.